Well, Idaho's lawmakers wasted little time in making school choice legislation a top priority this year. Before the 68th legislative session officially began yesterday, there was a get-together to promote the push to allow for public money to pay for private school education in Idaho. Well, this time around, it would be in the form of a tax credit. And despite not seeing a draft of the bill just yet, Idaho's education leaders are weighing in on what it could be and how it might impact the state's K-12 budget. Yesterday, we heard from the Idaho Education Association, who's not really in favor of it. Today, Joe Paris spoke with the Superintendent of Public Instruction, that'd be Debbie Crutchfield. So the question is, Joe, what are her concerns about the possibility of seeing this bill?
I think her concerns will echo what a lot of the fair questions are right now in terms of accountability, in terms of financial, and in terms of what are we getting in this investment. So there are a lot of good questions going on right now, and there are sometimes more questions than answers. But when you talk about the entire education budget, what the state puts towards education every year is essentially the largest line item in Idaho's budget, and moving tax dollars around through credits or whatever, it could impact how everything's done. So Superintendent Crutchfield, for starters, was encouraged by the governor's State of the State address in terms of investment into public education. But the funding formula is something that she wants to examine closely and possibly change as conversations around K-12 and school choice continue. One size fits all just doesn't really hit the mark.
We want to take a portion of that public schools budget and send it out based on the needs of students in our communities. Our budget right now sends it out based on averages that look like everybody else, and we're advocating that an update to the public schools funding must include acknowledgement that our districts and charters are different, our kids are different, the needs of our classrooms are different.
Because a classroom in West Ada County might look different than Ryrie, Idaho, and the considerations for funding that would be on top of a base amount per student, it would include things like special education students, economically disadvantaged areas, gifted and talented kids, at-risk learners, other things as well, each weighted for select additional funding. And we will dig into that proposal, into the details when that's presented in its final form in the coming weeks. But back to school choice. Crutchfield appreciated how Governor Little outlined what boxes need to be checked for him to sign what could be $50 million proposal for some kind of a program, likely a tax credit, but we will see. The major topic to tackle with school choice for Crutchfield and other state leaders I've talked to already this week, accountability.
I'm looking at some of the elements that our public schools have. We ask that adults that are working around children have some kind of a background check. I think that that's important. We also look at assessment. There are federal and state requirements around assessing kids to make sure that that learning took place. Some will argue that, parents are making choices because the public schools don't fit their needs. And I'm not going to argue against that because parents need to make those decisions. But when we start talking about the state now becoming a player in paying for private education, I think that that raises a level of scrutiny.
And another key piece to it all is financial transparency as to where money is going, how tax dollars are being used. And, Brian, if you talk to critics in other places like Arizona, they'll hear stories, or you'll hear stories about, oh, someone bought a trampoline, somebody bought golf lessons for their kids. So it's one of these things where when you talk to Idahoans that are skeptical, they trust parents, but when there are tax dollars involved, it needs to have a high threshold.
And it'll be interesting to see how this goes forward. Attendance is now how they fund schools. If students start ditching schools, how's that going to change what the state pays toward those schools? We'll address that again as we see that bill. Thank you very much, Joe.